Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis blog. There is a question, and it's a really poor and misguided question that I get asked a lot, both by potential clients and also by hypnotherapists, psychotherapists, coaches, NLP practitioners. And the question is, does technique X or method X work for problem, issue, or mental illness Y? So essentially, does technique X work for issue Y? Most people seem to think that this is a completely legitimate and good question. It's actually not, and I'm hoping to demonstrate that to you by doing this particular vlog piece. Now, here's the problem with this particular question, and that is that there is no such thing as a phobia. There is no such thing as a depression. There is no such thing as an addiction. There is no such thing as the future or the past. There is no such thing as a trauma, nor is there such a thing as a self or low self-esteem. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't struggling, that people aren't suffering. They are. What I am saying is that at the level of experience, there is no such thing as a depression separate from the thinking process. At the level of experience, there is no such thing as a phobia separate from the thinking process. At the level of experience, there is no such thing as an allergy separate from the thinking process. So the technique question kind of presupposes that, yeah, you have your representations, you have the thought process, the thought stream, and then you have this thing called the addiction or the phobia or the depression. But at the level of experience, there is no such thing separate from the thinking process. This is something that you can help people discover through, paradoxically, thought experiments, studies, stories. So one of the things that I do in the psychological illusion model that I teach is that when people come and see me, they essentially always say that, look, because of these events in the past, for example, I have these feelings right now. Or because I'm going to speak in front of an audience next week, I have this anxiety right now. Or because, uh, or I have low self-esteem. Or because of this situation, or because she said that, I have these experiences. So clients are essentially telling us that they feel a thing such as the past or the future or the event or the situation or the phobia that is somehow affecting them. But this is all due to thinking without knowing that they're thinking. If you think and thoughts are unseen, meaning you don't quite see thoughts as they emerge, or you don't understand how your experience is generated, then it's going to look like you experience the past and the future and low self-esteem and that other people are making you feel a particular way. This is all the result of falling for quite a simple psychological illusion. So it's possible to help people see through these types of illusions. There's no such thing as a self in there either. When people talk about, not being enough or being a failure or whatever, there is no such thing as a self that's enough or not enough in there, separate from the thinking process. This is also due to thoughts not being seen as thoughts. So the way I look at it, this work can be extremely forgiving. I mean, I've for many years used to help clients reinforce these illusions, and they were often happy. I mean, we often got some really good results together. At the same time, I think a more ethical, a more accurate way of working is to help people to actually discover that there is no such thing as at the level of experience that I just described. So that's one part of the equation. Now, when people talk about techniques, does technique X work for issue Y? Well, there is no technique separate from the thinking process either. It kind of presupposes that there's this technique, this treatment that works on this other this particular issue, and this is completely illusory. Um, at the level of experience, there is no technique as an that is doing something to you or is doing something about this other which you've kind of thingified. So the power doesn't lie in the technique, and this is a big weakness, in my opinion, of fields like CBT, REBT, neurolinguistic programming, hypnotherapy, is that we are way too often kind of selling the notion that the power or the change lies in the technique or in the method, and that there is this technique or this method that can work on or treat this that the client is somehow suffering from. And this is illusory. This is all the result of thinking without quite knowing that we're thinking, not quite understanding the nature of thought in our experience. Now, perhaps somewhat paradoxically, so here's something else too. In my experience, changes that people make are way more unstable when they think that there is an that has um, cured an in their experience versus having discovered the illusory nature of their experience. So in terms of how I work with clients, and this is somehow tricky because I do use a lot of thought experiments. I do use some tools. I do use some techniques. In the past, I wasn't as good to kind of help, too many of my clients left leaving that I had done something to them or that hypnosis works or the technique works. So these days I might still use some tools, but it's not under the framework that the techniques or the methods will change anyone. They are more thought experiments, stories, hypnotic phenomena, used as tools, as pointers, used as tools to help people discover the nature of their own experience. And this is a huge distinction. There's a difference between being had by a particular method or a particular technique where you kind of think that the technique or the method is doing something versus being able to use it as a tool. You're knowingly using something as a tool because it looks to be a great way of pointing someone towards something where someone can make their own embodied discoveries. So having said this, somewhat paradoxically, even though the power does not lie in the technique, There are some frameworks that are more accurate than others, just in terms of facts. There does seem to be ways of pointing that are more effective on average than other ways of pointing. So, for example, psychoanalysis clearly is not a method of choice in helping someone get over, look, here we're back to the same old illusion, get over a phobia, for example. It just doesn't seem to be working really well. Now, so for example, having a meditation practice is extremely useful. It's extremely useful in cultivating your concentration, in developing your sensory clarity, in helping you to stay present with your internal experience and look at it with a level of precision and to feel it with less resistance, and thereby making a lot of discoveries that you probably wouldn't have made as easily hadn't you cultivated your mind through systematic mind training. So there is something to be said about, for example, having a meditation practice or having certain rituals where you cultivate certain qualities of the mind that can make you more accident prone, so to speak, in terms of having particular insights. There are quite a few people in, for example, the direct path communities, in the three principles communities, that are very down on techniques and very down on the intellect in general, and who claim that you don't have to do anything with your experience, and they're right. But the fact that you don't have to do anything does not translate into you have to do nothing, you know. And there are, again, I'm making a case that there are benefits to training your attention. There are ways of becoming more accident prone to insights. There are ways of guiding people beyond storytelling. Because the very same people who say, don't do any techniques, well, they're guiding people through stories. Now, storytelling is, in a sense, a technique, meaning if a teacher shows up in front of a group with the intent to help people connect in particular ways, or to see particular things, or discover certain things, and the stories kind of flow out of that intent, there's not a big difference between that and a teacher who has the same intent and who may then guide the participants through some thought experiments or some eyes closed guided imagery or hypnotic phenomena processes designed to help people connect the dots and make certain discoveries. The internal processes of the participants are likely very similar. So to label one of them as a technique and the other one as no technique is not, it's kind of a flawed way of looking at things. So there is a place for techniques, there is a place for formats, for thought experiments. Storytelling is another technique. Conversations is another technique. The client or the participants is making his or her own discoveries. So, and you know, different people may make different discoveries in different ways. Um, for some people, conversation may be excellent. For some people, storytelling may be great. For other people, hypnotic phenomena or thought experiments or paradoxes or just angling things a little bit differently may help them make discoveries that they wouldn't have made otherwise. But you can do all of this without presupposing that there is an it, meaning the technique, that works on, cures, or treats an it that is somehow separate from the person's internal process. That, I think, is the key distinction. So I hope this was useful. I hope this was useful and that it can evoke or inspire some fresh thinking around this very issue and help you in your discoveries. So until next time, thanks for listening.